Okay, so we have an exam upcoming, right, on Thursday for you guys, right? Thursday in the evening, so during your lab period, you've got your exam. So you should have all gotten the announcement of the practice exam. I posted the two solution video, the solution for two of the last three problems up online. The last problem, which is the analysis question, that was addressed in an earlier video, so I realized actually I don't have to do a video on that one because why redo the work and make you rewatch something like that? Or rather, watch a new video and I could just make you rewatch an old one. It's an explicit video on that one. It's like the last one on linked lists. It's linked list versus array list video, or array list versus linked list video. So what is planned for the day? Because you may have noticed the lack of really new content. So I'll be making some new videos tonight is the goal. Tomorrow at the latest. I'll be making new videos I'm not going to go over chapter 3. I'm going to skip to chapter 4, which is the stacks chapter. So I'll do I'll start videos on stacks because stacks and queues are essentially easier versions of linked lists. They're much simpler versions of linked lists. So now that you know how to build a linked list or an array list, you can use either strategy to build a stack or a queue. A stack being the linked list strategy being the way that requires the least amount of code. So that's the way I'll start by doing them. That makes them pretty easy to do. I also did not assign any new mandatory homework this week, but I did assign a extra credit assignment, and I'm not sure how much it's worth yet. Could be 5 points, could be 10 points of homework credit, or it might be a couple points of extra credit onto the exam. I'm not sure. But that one is based on the solitaire encryption algorithm, which is a real-life algorithm made for a real book that's fiction, right? So it was a real book designed by a real it was a real algorithm designed by a security researcher for these fictional characters to communicate. So anyway, the solitaire algorithm works great for practice with manipulating linked lists. In fact, one of the questions on the practice exam, the triple cut question, which is, as I mentioned on the video, it's a lot easier if we just pretend we're doing stuff on paper, like we pretend we're inside a linked list that only has to deal with integers, than it is to actually code it up, because I would have to be in a specific linked list class that was just only had integers and only assuming it was integers. So I mentioned that basically that this is one of those questions that's easier to ask on paper, but that question was on the practice exam, and the only reason this practice assignment did not get put up last week is because I was extremely tempted to go out and buy about $50 worth of playing cards, so that you would all have decks for your exam, and then give you guys these that assignment for your exam. And I decided against that because it was while it was fun. It's not exactly an act I can repeat. The exam itself, right? The structure will be very, very similar to So let's go over here. Practice exam. Right there's the triple cut question. The structure of your actual exam will be very similar to the actual exam. Two important things I wish to point out, that you may not have noticed because you might have skipped over these first two pages. The first page, note that the number of points adds up to 105. There's a 5-point buffer kind of built in, so you can miss 15 points worth of questions, still get an A, miss 25 points worth of questions, and still end up with a B. So there's just this built-in buffer that I like to put in. 3 of the questions on the actual exam are explicitly extra credit, but I break it up into being more useful for you. And then this one, right? You are allowed to bring a page of notes, right? You're allowed to bring a page of notes front and back, either A4 or US letter, depending on what you have, right? So now I added in the add all method onto the actual exam on here just as a reference over there. But this is essentially what I would have made. This is essentially just a reference for you in case you forget your cheat sheet or something, right? So you're not left completely stranded, but also because some of these things you might not think to include on your cheat sheet, like, oh, right, substring is a thing, and so is the starts with method, which you may have never used, which is when you call string, right? So say you have a string called word, you can do word dot starts with and then enter in a string, and it will return true or false if that string starts with, if the word starts with that string, right? And it's a string, so you can make it as big as you want. So this is this is a really useful method, and the fact that I'm talking about it might hint that it's used on the exam. So since it doesn't seem to be used on the practice exam at all. Then you have your get and set methods, right? You have get, set, remove, add, your two add methods, your size, your contain. And unless I tell you explicitly you can't use any of these methods, you can use these methods, right? All right. And again, don't leave a question blank. If you have if you're pretty sure you have an idea of how to solve it, but you're having trouble putting it into code, or you have a broad idea of how to solve it, just write down the process. Write down, don't even go to pseudocode. Describe what you would want to do in pseudocode. Maybe that will jostle your memory, but at the very least, you'll get some partial credit there for being able to describe your problem-solving process. Yes?
Could you clarify, what did the function or method starts?
With right. So if you let me go ahead and just show you a demo, the quickest demo of it. So string word equals hello, right? If I did word dot starts with he, that would return true. If I did B, that would return false. Okay? So if I did E, just E by itself, it would return false. If I did H, it would return true, right? It's one of those, it does what it says on the tin functions, right? It's one of those that and it's incredibly useful once you realize you have access to it. All right, and most importantly of all, don't panic. Extra credits available for exceptional answers. These typically rely on some insights or some ambiguities you might see in problems at dealing with the big O notation for this exam. So the answer is almost always going to be, the full credit answer is almost always going to be like O of n or O of n squared, or possibly constant time if you manage to write something clever. But yeah. So before the class started, somebody bothered asking, hey, so how similar is it going to be? And I can say without a doubt that it is going to be extremely similar. So we've got this page over here, this first page over here, which goes over here's a linked list, here's a dot previous and next calls, which one node is this referring to. That page is exactly as written, is on the exam. The only thing I did was change these, the actual physical question, right? So that should be fairly easy. This page is split into two pages, and it only has the drawing portion on it, right? Draw what happens to this linked list when we put something here, right? Or something else, Or given some code, draw what happens to this code. Right, so here then you'll be getting two list questions, and don't forget these portions at the bottom where I give you the big O notation, right? And as I mentioned in the video, whether I'm most likely going to assume that you're working with array lists because those are easy to manipulate and easy to think about with these questions, but depending on how you code these up, if you're dealing with the linked list or array lists, the big O notation will have the time complexity will have a different answer, and if you can figure that out, that's worth a bit of extra credit. That goes back to the whole, all questions are essay questions. But, if you want to keep it simple and just count the for loops, then that's probably going to work for getting full credit on those points. So, but there will be two questions. Rather than being 5 points, this one will be 10 points. Yes?
For that question in particular, why did you start with min being integer?
As big as possible, and max, because I wanted to show you how I would do it there. Okay, min is as big as possible, so any value you're going through from the list that you find in the list is pretty much guaranteed to be smaller than this one, right? The other alternative is grabbing index 0, right? But, that's kind of silly if the list is empty, but might give you a null pointer exception if the list is empty. I just this is just a way of doing that you may not have thought of doing it, and it's a good opportunity to show it to you. Basically, the minimum value is we start out with the biggest value, and we make our smallest value, the biggest value, the smallest possible value, so that when we encounter new values, it'll immediately get set to those. Okay, so suppose you have a list of strings, right? So you're probably going to deal with one method that deals with a list of strings and another method that deals with a list of integers. Okay, and both are 10 points plus 2 points for figuring out what the big O notation is. Okay, so rely on the stuff from your second exam. Then you've got linked list questions. So if you've looked at the video, you'll find that this one is extremely easy, right? You have to access the head, tail, and node class. So really, this one was easy enough to just do. This one was easy enough to solve by just setting the head is equal to null and the tail equal to 0. Sorry, the head equal to null, the tail equal to null, and the size equal to 0, and that deletes the entire list, right? Assuming it's, that will get rid of that one. So then we had this count method, so a lot of these methods are also going to deal with manipulating a linked list, unlike the circular linked list assignment, which we manipulated it, but we were manipulating it in ways that we were safe with, right? Ways that I'd gone over in the text in my videos, right? Here you're manipulating them in different ways. So that's your practice for that over here. And the reason I gave you the homework, the extra credit exam, practice exam, is because I want you to be able to get more practice manipulating it in these weird ways, right? The encryption algorithm has 5 steps, all of which manipulate the deck of cards or the linked list in some way. So you'll get a bunch of these questions. You'll have a few less questions, believe it or not. They'll just be worth a bit more. Like there's 2 15-point linked list questions, and typically for those questions, the way they work is that they have, just like the add method, they have multiple cases, right? So you just say, okay, identifying the cases correctly gives you some points, and then each individual case gives you some points. So it's partial credit so we're able to distribute partial credit in a very fair and effective manner. But a lot of problems can be solved deceptively simple. And as I go, as I go through my, you may have watched my video, and the hard problems like question 17 and 18. My answer to these were, well, these looked hard, but if I could make a new linked list that was going to store all the stuff that I needed, only the stuff I wanted, that would be easier, and that's what I do. And then I move everything back into the original linked list. Right? That's how I solve this problem and this problem, because that's a really effective problem. Now, these are actually this problem and this problem specifically, right? This one actually is an adaptation of an interview question that's since then been deprecated because, since everybody knows that interview question, nobody asks it anymore. Reverse a linked list. And it typically works like this. How do you reverse a linked list? Okay, how do you reverse a singly linked list? Okay, well, now you reverse a singly linked list. How do you do it in place, being the third step? Like, how do you do it without creating a new linked list to begin with, right? And that one is kind of a real tricky one to do. But basically, and here I don't care about being tricky. I just care about you giving me a solution. Doesn't need to be the best solution. It just needs to solve the problem. Get what I'm saying? Right? There's trickier ways to do it. There's elegant ways to do it. But I prefer you just do it. All right. And then this question again, 20 points. So please, please be sure to know that this question pretty much appears almost exactly word for word on the actual exam. The difference is that to make it slightly easier on the actual exam and to make sure you don't forget stuff, I kind of give you compare and contrast using these attributes, right? Compare these things, compare these things, compare these things, rather than just giving you one big blank sheet of paper. Okay. Also on the back of the actual exam, worth 1 point, is a survey it's a blank sheet of paper that basically tells you to just tear it off and hand it in. So that way it remains pseudo-anonymous, right? Like, I could technically go and take that sheet of paper and compare it to your handwriting, but that's too much trouble, so I'm not going to do it. But it's a way for you to tell me that basically, in a pseudo-anonymous way, how you feel the class is going, right? Right? How do you feel that the class is going well, right? What you feel needs to be changed, and you get a point for filling that out, right? And I just assume that you fill it out, okay? If you do, for some reason, need to disparage me in some way, and you need to, get yourself a temporary email account and send something that way if you really are concerned about pissing me off with a comment about my teaching methods. But I'm open to real criticism here, as opposed like, does the flipped classroom work? Do we need to do a mix of traditional lectures and flipped lectures? So please let me know what's going to work. All right. So with that said, are there any questions about the exam that like not about specific problems, but like because I'll go over those with you if you have questions about the specific exam, while we're here. Otherwise, we do have another quiz, and I just wanted to give people plenty of chance to just trickle in from the not such, well, it's not a trickle outside. Is it now? So it's a trickle now. So, okay. Yeah, it was pretty bad earlier, so I wanted to give people plenty of time to not miss out on taking the quiz because... Okay, so the password for the quiz is, and I'll stop the recording here.